The truth is, some people are born to build, and some are born to burn. In this part of the city, there isn't enough room for both.
Sophia stood behind the heavy pass of her kitchen, her palms pressed flat against the warm stainless steel. Through the massive front window of the hearth, she watched the north side of the street. It was a cold, silver world over there. Onyx looked like a diamond cut from ice, sharp edges, and a silence that felt heavy enough to choke you. She could see him, Diho. He was hunched over a plate with a pair of silver tweezers, moving with a precision that made her teeth ache. He didn't cook, he performed surgery. Everything in his world was calculated, quiet, and stripped of its soul until only the bare bones remained. Sophia gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned a dusty gray. Her own kitchen was a different beast entirely. Behind her, the industrial mixers hummed a low, vibrating growl that she could feel in the soles of her boots. The air was thick, heavy with the heat of the wood-fired hearth and the sharp, stinging ghost of dried peppers. It was loud, it was crowded, and it was hers. But the numbers on the ledger didn't care about soul. The rent in this district had tripled in a year, and the elite crowds were fickle. They wanted the new, they wanted the perfect, and lately they were crossing the street to the silver diamond instead of coming through her door. She looked at the stack of unpaid invoices tucked under her order rail. Then her phone buzzed against the metal table, a sharp, jagged vibration that cut through the bass of the music. It was a notification from the city's most feared critic. The man was a kingmaker or a grave digger, depending on his mood. Sophia read the screen twice, her breath hitching in her chest. The Duel of the Iron District, the headline read. The critic wasn't coming to eat, he was coming to judge a collision. He wanted a joint menu, a 10-course execution where Sophia and Diho had to share a single kitchen. The winner would get the investment of a lifetime. The loser, well, the loser would be forced to pack their knives and hand over the keys to the bank. Sophia looked back across the street, her eyes locking onto the man in the white coat. As if he felt the weight of her stare, Diho looked up. His face was a mask of calm, stone cold and unreadable, but he didn't look away. He saw the phone in her hand. He already knew. The street between them felt like a canyon, 15 feet of cracked asphalt that was about to swallow one of them whole. Sophia reached back and tightened the knot of her apron, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She didn't plan on being the one who disappeared. She was going to outcook him, outwork him, and break that silver silence of his until there was nothing left but the heat. The war had finally moved inside the house. The heavy, rhythmic thud of Diho's knife hitting the wooden board sounded like a slow-beating heart, or a countdown. Sophia stood 3 feet away from him in the neutral kitchen, her own station a mess of vibrant greens and blackened spices. The air in the room was cold, but the tension between them was a physical weight that made it hard to draw a full breath. This was the first morning of the dual review prep, and neither of them had said a single word since they walked through the back door. Diho didn't look at her. His focus was entirely on a single piece of white fish that he was slicing with the precision of a diamond cutter. Every movement he made was small, controlled, and entirely too perfect for Sophia's liking. She grabbed a heavy iron skillet and slammed it onto the burner, the loud clang of metal on metal echoing through the sterile room like a gunshot. Diho didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just kept slicing. "The critic wants a 10-course menu," Sophia said, her voice low and raspy from the morning's humidity. "He doesn't want 10 individual plates. He wants a story that flows." Diho finally paused, his blade hovering a fraction of an inch above the board. "A story needs structure," he replied, his voice as smooth and cool as the polished concrete floors beneath them. "It doesn't need noise." Sophia felt the heat rise in her neck, a familiar burn that usually fueled her through a 16-hour shift. "Noise is where the life is," she countered, stepping closer into his space. "You're trying to serve him a ghost. I'm trying to serve him a memory." She reached past him to grab a bowl of salt, and for a second, the world seemed to tilt. Her shoulder brushed against his, a sudden, unexpected jolt of heat that felt like a static shock in the middle of a winter storm. Diho froze. Sophia could see the pulse jumping in the side of his neck, the only crack in his icy armor. He was taller than she had realized from across the street, and he smelled like ozone and sharp ginger, a scent that didn't belong in a kitchen full of smoke. She didn't pull away immediately, and neither did he. For 3, 4, 5 seconds, they just stood there in the narrow gap between their stations. The vibration of the industrial refrigerator hummed through the floorboards, shaking the soles of their boots. It was a challenge, a silent standoff that had nothing to do with knives or critics. Diho was the first to move, stepping back and resetting his stance like a soldier on parade. "The first course is mine," he said, his voice tighter than it had been a moment ago. "It will be clean, it will be quiet, and it will set the stage." Sophia leaned her hip against her station, a slow, dangerous smirk spreading across her face. "Fine," she said, picking up a handful of dark, oily peppers. "You set the stage, and I'll be the one to set it on fire." The battle lines were drawn, but as she watched him turn back to his fish, Sophia realized the ice wasn't as thick as she thought. The war was no longer just about the street. It was about the 2 inches of air between them that still felt like it was burning. "Your plating looks like a funeral, quiet and dead." Sophia didn't look up from her prep station as she threw the words across the stainless steel, her voice cutting through the hum of the overhead vents. Diho stopped moving, his long, slender fingers hovering over a dish of poached sea bass that looked like a piece of modern art. "It is called restraint, Sophia," he said, his tone as flat as the blade of his knife. "The critic is looking for clarity, not a riot on a plate." Sophia let out a short, jagged laugh and stepped around her counter. Holding a small wooden spoon dripping with a dark, velvet sauce she'd been simmering for 4 hours. The air between them was thick with the smell of toasted nuts and deep, fermented heat, a heavy contrast to his clean, oceanic workspace. "He's looking for a reason to feel alive," she countered, stopping just inches from his elbow. "And right now, this fish is just a cold piece of math." Before he could pull the plate away, she flicked the spoon. A single, bold streak of deep red sauce cut right through the center of his pristine white reduction, a jagged scar of flavor that looked like a lightning bolt. Diho's jaw tightened so hard she could hear the faint click of his teeth, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the sabotage. "You just ruined 3 hours of prep," he hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low vibration. "I didn't ruin it. I gave it a pulse," Sophia said, her heart thumping against her ribs from the sheer audacity of the move. "Taste it, if you're not too afraid of a little dirt in your perfection." Diho stared at the ruined plate for a long beat, his chest rising and falling in a slow, controlled rhythm. Then, slowly, he picked up a tasting spoon and took a small piece of the fish, making sure to catch the edge of her dark sauce. Sophia watched his face, looking for the sneer, the rejection, the icy comment that would start another round of their war. But it didn't come. He chewed slowly, his eyes closing for a fraction of a second, and she saw his throat move as he swallowed. The silence in the kitchen stretched out, heavy and tactile, like the weight of a damp cloth. Diho looked down at the plate, then back at her, and for the first time, the ice in his gaze seemed to crack. "The smoke in the sauce," he whispered, almost to himself. "It pulls the sweetness out of the fat in the bass." He didn't look angry anymore. He looked startled, like a man who had been hit by a wave he didn't see coming. "It's too much for a first course," he said, but he didn't wipe the plate clean. "But for the third, it might be the only thing that saves us." Sophia felt a strange, dizzying rush of heat that had nothing to do with the stoves. He wasn't just admitting she was right. He was looking at her like she was the first person who had ever actually challenged his mind. "Maybe your math needs a little chaos, Diho," she said, her voice softer now, dropping the bite. He didn't argue. He just moved his station, making a small, deliberate space for her heavy iron pots right next to his silver spoons. The sabotage had turned into an invitation, and the air in the room suddenly felt a lot smaller than it had 10 minutes ago.
Hello, family. Where are you watching from? Kindly drop your location or where you're watching from in the comment section. And also, most importantly, kindly subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Alright, let's proceed further.
Debt doesn't just sit in a bank account. It breathes down the back of your neck like a predator. Sophia sat on a plastic crate in the alley behind the kitchen, the cold brick wall biting into her spine. It was 3 a.m, and the Iron District was finally quiet, save for the distant hum of a street sweeper. She pulled a crumpled envelope from her apron pocket, the red, past due stamp looking like a bloody thumbprint under the yellow street lamp. If the critic didn't give her his blessing, the hearth was gone by the end of the month. The sound of a heavy metal door creaking open made her jump, the hinges screaming in the silence. Diho stepped out into the alley, his white chef's coat draped over his arm, revealing a plain black t-shirt that clung to his broad shoulders. He didn't see her at first. He just leaned against the dumpster and exhaled a long, shaky breath that turned into mist in the cold air. "It's a lot of paper for one person to carry," Sophia said, her voice making him stiffen. Diho turned slowly, his eyes falling on the red-stamped envelope in her hand. He didn't offer a fake smile or a pitying look. He just sat down on the concrete curb across from her crate. "My father spent 40 years in a kitchen just like yours," he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper she had never heard before. "He died with his hands in the sink, and 3 mortgages on a house that didn't belong to him." Sophia felt a sharp, sudden pang of recognition that made her throat tighten. She had spent years thinking he was a prince in a silver tower, but looking at him now, she saw the same tired lines around his eyes that she saw in her own mirror every morning. "I moved here to be different," he continued, tracing a crack in the pavement with the toe of his boot. "I built Onyx to be perfect so that no one could ever take it away. But perfection is expensive, Sophia." He looked up, and the raw honesty in his gaze was more intimate than any touch they had shared in the kitchen. "If I lose this review, I don't just lose a restaurant. I lose the only thing that proves my father's life wasn't a waste of time." Sophia reached out, her fingers brushing against the rough, calloused skin of his hand. The connection was electric, a heavy, grounding heat that seemed to pull the air right out of her lungs. They weren't rivals in that moment. They were just 2 people drowning in the same dark water, trying to find a way to stay afloat. "We're not going to lose," she said, her voice firm, even though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Diho didn't pull his hand away. He turned his palm up, lacing his fingers through hers. His grip was strong, steady, and held a desperate kind of hope that broke through her last remaining defenses. The silence of the alley wrapped around them, thick and heavy, and for the first time, the fear didn't feel so heavy because she wasn't carrying it alone. "Tomorrow," he whispered, his thumb tracing the line of her wrist, "we stop cooking for the critic. And we start cooking for us," she finished. The deal was struck in the dark, far away from the cameras and the critics, and the weight of the debt finally felt like something she could carry. The heavy copper pipe behind the industrial stove didn't just leak, it screamed. A jagged spray of scalding water hissed into the air, turning the prep kitchen into a blind, white sauna in seconds. Sophia dropped her whisk, the sound of it hitting the tile lost in the roar of the steam. "Get back," she yelled, her voice cracking as she shoved a stack of dry towels against the heat. The water was everywhere, pooling under the legs of the heavy steel tables and threatening the pilot lights of the main line. Diho didn't run for the door. Instead, he lunged through the cloud of gray mist toward the main shut-off valve behind the tall refrigerators. The metal was slick, coated in a film of condensation that made his hands slide uselessly against the iron wheel. "It's stuck," he roared, his face slick with sweat, his eyes wide with a rare, jagged panic. Sophia didn't think. She just moved, sliding into the narrow, cramped space beside him. The heat was suffocating, a physical weight that pressed against her lungs as she reached for the valve. "Together," she gasped, her shoulder locking against his as they both gripped the cold metal wheel. Their wet skins skidded against each other, a frantic, sliding friction that felt like a spark in the middle of a flood. 1, 2, 3. They threw their entire weight into the turn, their muscles straining until Sophia's teeth ached from the effort. The valve groaned, a deep, metallic protest that vibrated through their combined grip. With a final, shuddering clunk, the wheel gave way. The screaming hiss of the pipe died down to a pathetic drip, leaving the kitchen in a sudden, ringing silence. Sophia slumped against the side of the fridge, her breath coming in ragged, shallow bursts. Diho didn't move away. He stayed right there, his chest heaving, his damp black shirt plastered to his skin. His hand was still resting on top of hers on the valve, his fingers trembling just a little. The steam began to thin, revealing the mess they had made, the scattered prep, and the ruined sauces. But Sophia wasn't looking at the kitchen. She was looking at the way Diho was looking at her, his guard completely gone, his hair damp and messy over his forehead. He reached up, his thumb brushing a stray drop of water from her cheek. The touch was slow, deliberate, and heavier than any collision they had before. "You didn't leave," he whispered, his voice low and rough. "I don't leave when things get hot, Diho," she replied, her heart hammering a rhythm she could feel in her fingertips. He stepped closer, the heat from his body rolling off him in waves, filling the tiny space between them. The mess on the floor didn't matter. The critic didn't matter. Nothing mattered but the way his grip tightened on her hand. They were standing in the wreckage of a disaster, but for the first time, the air didn't feel like a war zone. It felt like a beginning. Diho leaned his forehead against hers, the contact grounding them both in the quiet, damp room. "We have 4 hours to fix the prep," he said, but he didn't move an inch. "Then let's get to work," Sophia whispered, her eyes never leaving his. The blowout hadn't broken them. It had fused them together, and the fire in the kitchen was finally under control. Why do we do this? Spend 16 hours a day sweating over a stove just to watch someone finish a plate in 10 minutes. Sophia leaned against the heavy industrial fridge, watching Diho work in the dimmed light of the prep kitchen. The question hung in the air, vibrating alongside the low hum of the cooling fans. Diho didn't stop his task. He was carefully peeling the skin from a roasted pepper, his fingers moving with a gentleness she hadn't seen before. "My mother said a kitchen is the only place where you can turn a memory into something you can touch," he said, his voice soft, stripped of its usual professional edge. He looked up, his eyes catching the warm glow of the heat lamps. "I cook because I don't know how to say I'm still here any other way. And you?" Sophia looked at her hands, the small scars from old burns and the faint stains of spices that never truly washed off. "I cook because my grandmother told me that if you feed someone, they can't ever really be a stranger to you," she whispered. "I wanted to build a place where the walls felt like a hug and the food felt like home." She walked over to his station, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating off his skin. For weeks, she had seen his minimalism as a lack of heart, but now she saw it for what it was. It wasn't empty, it was focused. He was trying to make sure that not a single note of the ingredient was lost in the noise. "You're not cold, Diho," she said, her voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur. "You're just terrified of wasting a single second." Diho set the knife down, the metal clicking softly against the marble. He turned toward her, his gaze dropping to her lips before snapping back to her eyes. The space between them was electric, a heavy, thick tension that made the air feel like it was made of wool. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her waist, hesitating. Sophia didn't wait. She took a half step forward, closing the distance until her chest brushed his. The world outside, the debt, the critic, the rivalry, it all faded into the background. He leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek, and for a heartbeat, she thought he was going to break the rule they hadn't spoken out loud. His nose brushed hers, a slow, agonizingly close near miss that made her knees feel weak. But he stopped, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes closed tight. "If I kiss you now," he whispered, his voice breaking, "I won't be able to fight you tomorrow." Sophia reached up, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. "Who says I want to fight you?" she breathed. He didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in further either. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, two people who had spent their lives building walls, finally realizing they were standing in the same room. The unity menu wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about the fact that her fire was the only thing that could melt his ice, and his precision was the only thing that could hold her spirit together. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice steadying, "we show them what happens when we stop pretending we're alone." Sophia nodded, her heart hammering a frantic, hopeful rhythm against her ribs. The war was over, and the real work was just beginning. 5 minutes from now, one of them will own this street, and the other will be a memory. Sophia stood in the center of the silent dining room, her hands trembling inside the pockets of her clean white apron. The tables were set with a precision that screamed of Diho's influence, sharp edges, heavy silver, and white linens that looked like fresh snow. But the air was hers. It was thick with the ghost of charred wood and the deep, humming vibration of the bass-heavy playlist she had refused to turn down. The front door was locked, but she could see the silhouette of the critic standing on the sidewalk, checking his watch under the glow of a street lamp. Everything they had worked for, the late nights, the scalding steam, the debt, it all came down to the next 3 hours. Sophia turned back toward the kitchen pass, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Diho was already there, standing as still as a statue in front of the 10-course prep list they had written together. He looked up as she approached, and for the first time, the professional mask didn't snap into place. His eyes were dark, tired, and filled with a quiet, fierce heat that made her breath catch in her throat. "The fish is resting," he said, his voice a low, steady anchor in the storm of her nerves. "The reduction is perfect, and the spice blend you made, it's exactly where it needs to be." Sophia walked up to the edge of the stainless steel, stopping just inches from him. The unity menu was taped to the wall between them, a messy, beautiful collision of his technical math and her soulful history. Course 4, his delicate scallops, seared in her smoky, fermented pepper butter. Course 7, her slow-braised lamb, finished with his bright, vinegar-sharp radish pearls. It was a risk, a massive, terrifying gamble that shouldn't work on paper, but felt like lightning in the pan. "If we fail," Sophia whispered, her voice cracking just a little, "I don't think I can go back to just being the girl across the street." Diho reached across the pass, his fingers brushing against her jaw before tangling in the hair at the back of her neck. He pulled her forward until their foreheads touched, the heat from his skin grounding her in the moment. "We aren't going back," he said, his voice dropping to a rough, intimate promise. "Whatever happens when those doors open, we do it together." The sound of a heavy brass key turning in the front lock echoed through the empty restaurant like a gunshot. Sophia took a deep, shuddering breath and straightened her shoulders, her eyes locking onto his. The flash-forward of her life without this kitchen, without this man, was a gray, empty place she refused to visit again. Diho stepped back, picking up his knife with a fluid, practiced motion that signaled the end of the piece. The critic walked in, his footsteps clicking on the polished floor like a countdown. "Showtime," Sophia breathed, moving to her station. The silence was gone, replaced by the sudden, electric roar of the burners. The war was over, the collaboration was final, and the only thing left to do was survive the night. The rough vibration of the industrial dishwasher hummed through the soles of Sophia's boots, a steady, grounding thrum that fought the frantic rhythm of her heart. She pressed her damp palms against the cold metal of the prep table, her breath hitching as she watched the server carry the fifth course out into the dining room. The kitchen was a blur of high-speed motion and calculated silence, a place where every second was a physical weight. Di-ho was a shadow at her side, his movements fluid and sharp as he plated the next dish with a precision that felt like a prayer. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He simply reached out and adjusted the angle of her garnish with a quick, silver flick of his tweezers. The tactile reality of the night was overwhelming. The biting cold of the walk-in fridge, the searing heat of the blue flames, and the constant, gritty resistance of the flour on her skin. "Course 6, Di-ho whispered, his voice a low vibration that she felt more than heard. Sophia grabbed the heavy iron pan, the weight of it familiar and solid in her hand. She began to sear the spice-rubbed meat, the loud, aggressive hiss of the fat hitting the hot surface, filling the narrow space between them. The critic sat alone at a small table near the window, a silent figure in a dark suit who hadn't looked up from his plate once. Every time the kitchen door swung open, Sophia caught a glimpse of his unreadable face, his eyes focused entirely on the texture of the food. The pressure was a living thing, a coil of wire tightening in her chest with every passing minute. She turned to grab a tasting spoon and bumped into Di-ho, their wet, heat-flushed skins skidding against each other in the cramped aisle. For a split second, the world outside the kitchen didn't exist. His hand steadied her elbow, his grip firm and warm through the thin fabric of her sleeve. They locked eyes, and she saw the same fierce, desperate hunger for victory that was burning in her own soul. "He hasn't touched his wine," Di-ho muttered, his thumb tracing a small, unconscious circle on her arm before he let go. "That means he's thinking," Sophia replied, her voice tight, "or he's bored." "He isn't bored," Di-ho said, stepping back into his rhythm. "He's surprised." By the 8th course, the kitchen felt like a vacuum, all the air sucked out by the intensity of the service. Sophia's muscles ached, and the salt from her sweat stung her eyes, but she couldn't stop. They were moving like a single machine now, her bold, smoky heat wrapping around his delicate, structured flavors. When the final plate of the 10th course left the kitchen, the silence that followed was deafening. The dishwasher's hum was the only sound left, a lonely, mechanical echo in the steam-filled room. Di-ho leaned his weight against the prep table, his head bowed, his chest heaving under his damp coat. Sophia walked over and stood beside him, her shoulder brushing his, their hands dangling inches apart. The critic was still sitting there, his plate empty, his silver fork resting perfectly straight across the porcelain. The silence stretched until it felt like it would break, and then, slowly, the man stood up. He didn't look back, he didn't nod. He simply walked out into the cold night of the Iron District. "And now," Sophia breathed, her fingers finally finding Di-ho's in the dark, "we wait for the ghost to speak." The Iron District is a different world when the stoves are off, and the neon signs start to flicker. The street was quiet, a long stretch of cracked asphalt that looked like a scar under the pale moon. Sophia stood on the curb, her back against the cold brick of the hearth, watching the cleaning crew move like ghosts inside Onyx across the way. The review had hit the internet an hour ago, a blunt, jagged piece of writing that had already set the city on fire. The critic hadn't picked a winner, he had picked a new direction. Individually, they were talented, the screen of her phone glowed with the words, but together, they were inevitable. He had called their collaboration the only honest meal in the city, a perfect bridge between the silent diamond and the screaming heart. The investment was theirs, but only if they stayed in the same kitchen. A shadow moved across the street, and Sophia saw Di-ho walking toward her, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of her, his breath turning into white mist in the sharp night air. "He wants us to tear down the wall," Diho said, his voice low and raspy from the long night of service. "He wants one restaurant, one menu, one name." Sophia looked up at him, the orange glow of a street lamp catching the sharp line of his jaw and the softness in his eyes that he only showed to her. "And what do you want, Diho?" she asked, her heart skipping a beat in the heavy silence. Diho reached out, his hand sliding out of his pocket to cup her face, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone with a slow, grounding pressure. "I want to stop looking at you through a window," he whispered, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. "I want the noise, and the heat, and the way you make my math feel like a song." Sophia felt the last of her defenses crumble, her fingers lacing through his as she pulled him closer into her space. The debt was gone, the rivalry was dead, and the street that had divided them for 3 years suddenly felt like a bridge instead of a canyon. "One kitchen," she breathed, her lips just an inch from his. "One kitchen," he promised, his voice a rough, steady anchor. He leaned in, and this time, there was no near miss, no hesitation, no professional line they were afraid to cross. The kiss tasted like salt, heat, and a future that didn't have any room for secrets or silence. It was a collision of everything they were, a bold, vibrant spark that finally melted the ice and lit up the dark alley. They stood there on the midnight curb, two suns that had finally found their orbit, while the city slept around them. The Iron District was still a hard, grinding place, but it didn't feel so cold anymore. Sophia looked back at her door, then at his, and then at the man holding her hand. The war was over, and for the first time in her life, Sophia knew exactly where she was supposed to be. They weren't out cooking each other anymore. They were finally just home. The war for the street is over. No more glass walls, no more silent diamonds. Just one kitchen, two hearts, and a flavor the city will never forget. Because when the ice finally melts, the real story begins.
In the end, it was never about winning. It was about finding the one person who turns your fire into something greater. Thanks for watching this video. Kindly subscribe to the channel.